On a day, the House of Representatives adopted the report of its committee, which approved 1.91 trillion naira for the Niger Delta Development Commission for the 2024 fiscal year. National Assembly correspondent Joke Adisa reports.
A correspondence from President Bola Tinubu requesting the approval of the House to a 6.2 trillion naira amendment to the 2024 Appropriation Act opens the day's legislative business. There was a bit of a rowdy session from the members as the House dissolved into an executive session. Back from the closed-door meeting, members lent support to the 2024 Appropriation Act Amendment Bill and its scale's second reading. The bill seeks to increase the 27.5 trillion naira 2024 budget by 6.2 trillion naira. If approved, the request will increase the 2024 budget to 33.7 trillion naira.
I rise to move that the bill for an act to amend the Appropriation Act 2024 and to authorize the issuance from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation the total sum of 3,200 billion naira for capital expenditure and the sum of 3 trillion naira only for the current expenditure for the year ending on the 31st day of December 2024, HB 1610, be read the second time.
The House also adopted the recommendations of its Committee on NDDC for the approval of 1.91 trillion naira as the Commission's 2024 budget.
The Statutory Revenue Fund of the Niger Delta Development Commission to the sum of 1,911,800 million naira only. At the sum of 835,222,569,924 naira only is for development projects.
From the amount, 38.5 billion naira is for personnel expenditure, 29.2 billion naira for overhead, 8.78 billion naira goes to development projects, while 1 trillion naira is for legacy projects to be funded through borrowing for the year ending 30th April 2025. Joke Adisa, TVC News, Abuja.
Let's take a short break, and when we return, it will be time to discuss local government autonomy and other matters with my guest, Jurin Gelale, who is the presidential spokesman. We'll be right back. Few minutes, we will be having a conversation relating to the local government autonomy, the Nigerian economy, and other matters, as this different reactions have been generated since the Supreme Court ruled that since paying the local governments through the state has not worked. Justice demands that local government allocations from the Federation account should henceforth be paid directly to the local government. And in recent developments, no fewer than 13 states have fixed dates for local government elections in the aftermath of last Thursday's Supreme Court judgment, which prohibited federal allocations to council being administered by caretaker committees. Tonight, let's speak with Jurin Gelale, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's good to see you again.
Good evening to you, my dear sister, and good evening to all of our viewers. Always good to be with you.
All right, so I think we should start with the most recent developments, which is that the president has launched the Nigeria Education Loan Fund with a promise to forge inclusiveness and ensure provision of sufficient funds to sustain this scheme. What more do you have for us on this?
Yes, thank you very much indeed. You know, at a time when Nigerian families across all states of the Federation are feeling the pinch of economic difficulty, His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is once again dealing with their needs in a direct fashion, which is why it was earlier today that His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu began disbursement of the fund to the students, the beneficiary students across the country. Now, in terms of the hard figures, where we are right now. As you might recall, Jumoke, His Excellency Mr. President, saw to the opening of the portal, the NEL Fund portal, essentially the portal through which applications are submitted, and where you have kind of real-time insight into, the administration of that fund. Now, since it opened up in May, I think it was May 25th, in the later days of May this year, we have now over 100,000, I think specifically about 103,000 successful applications. Right now, we have over 33 billion naira cash available, ready to be paid out to cover every single loan application that has been successfully submitted. In fact, one of the key questions His Excellency Mr. President, ever the pragmatist, asked earlier today during the disbursement ceremony was when he asked the NEL Fund Managing Director, Mr. Akintunde Sawyer, whether or not there was enough resource in the accounts to cover all of the loan applications that had been submitted. And so he was very happy to hear that indeed there is more than enough money to cover all of the loan applications that have been submitted, and those payouts have commenced assiduously. So that is now, we're no longer now talking about people just applying for the loans. We're now talking about people receiving funds that they applied for. And so now you have essentially 33 billion ready to go out the door. That's already started moving into the accounts of the beneficiaries. Again, not just the tuition payments paid directly to the institutions across all states of the Federation, but dealing with the individual needs of the students, upkeep costs, lodging, accommodation, feeding, transportation, and the like, all catered to as of today, just because of the follow-up action taken by His Excellency Mr. President to make sure that no stone is left unturned to deal with some of the more difficult aspects of what is facing Nigerian families in the economy today. I think I would further add that in addition to that, His Excellency Mr. President is really focused in on scaling up this program, really ensuring that across the country that there is enough and effective sensitization so that our young people, no matter where they are, will be able to get on the portal, apply for the support and access that support. And that's really the focus of the team. And we obviously heard as well from the chairman of the governing board of NEL Fund in the person of Mr. Jim Ovia, obviously a very decorated businessman and a person of integrity who the president trusts to effectively oversee the affairs of that program and ensure that the administration of that program is conducted in a fashion that is commensurate with international best standards and in a fashion that is commensurate with what is expected even from private sector operations. So there's really quite a bit for Nigerian families to be excited about today across the country.
Absolutely. So let's move on to another good news, which is local government autonomy. And despite a different reaction from one or two governors, seeing that states have commenced council post preparations shows that this is a good move. But how do you describe the reaction of one or two governors who have said that we'll review this verdict and seek homegrown solutions to this ruling? And if that is to stand, will that not jeopardize the end result intended to making sure governors get to the grassroots? Is the presidency bothered?
I think without any attempt to malign or disrespect anybody, I think it's fair to appreciate the fact that if you remove a feeding bottle from a baby, the baby's entitled to cry. And so if there are, legitimate attempts to seek any kind of a legal redress against the judgment of the Supreme Court, the administration of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will actively encourage anyone to go through a legal process to see to whatever challenge they want to institute. That is within their rights. That is within the right of any state or state governor or any actor. And so that's always going to be supported by this law-abiding administration of the president. With that said, I think that the example that you've cited is one that stands in isolation. That is not a collective position of the subnational administrators in this country. I think there is a recognition of the fact that what the president has done is to really abide by the legal due process available to achieve the kind of economic and national restructuring that our people have long clamored for. But unlike other, failed presidential candidates that campaigned on the notion of restructuring, even though they did not embark upon it when they had the chance to serve in high office, this is a president who did not talk a lot about restructuring during the campaigns, but assiduously and effectively, upon taking office, has effectively executed on restructuring. And he's done it through due process. And this is what Nigerians are applauding today across the country. This is why even within the political class there is alignment with the decision of the Supreme Court, because they recognize that the processes that led up to that decision were in line with the rule of law. And in addition to that, I think it's also important to note that when we look at the developmental challenges in the country across sectors, one of the elements that Nigerians have long groaned about, and rightfully so, has been the fact that, at the base of our society, the base of political and public administration, there has not been the kind of service delivery that justifies the existence of that tier. And I think one of the major outcomes of the judgment of the Supreme Court is the fact that there is no longer space for local government administrators to hide behind the finger and point fingers at anybody else for non-performance. Now that there is not just a judgment of the Supreme Court, but the implementation of that judgment, the local government administrators are going to be held accountable by their people to provide the services that those funds are intended to be used for. And that's something that I think should excite every Nigerian. But I also think that when you look at, for example, the road sector, the work sector, right? Quite naturally over the course of time, and again, a lot of this has to do with just the lack of availability of critical information to our people over time. But right now, you have a scenario in which across this country of ours, we have about 200,000 kilometers of total roadway. 200,000 kilometers of roadway across the country. That is the sum total of roads belonging to the federal government, to the state governments, and to the local governments, 200,000 kilometers. As we speak, right, you have essentially 35,000 kilometers that are domiciled as federal roads under the management and supervision of the Federal Ministry of Works, right? That's 35,000 out of 200,000 kilometers. You have another 35,000 kilometers that is domiciled within the under the supervision of and management of the state governments of the country. And then you have a whopping, a staggering 130,000 kilometers out of 200,000 kilometers that are under the management and supervision of local governments across our country. When you look at those numbers, right, and you appreciate the fact that our local governments have been consistently and actively defunded or underfunded by successive state administrations over the course of decades now, it is not a secret, it is not a shock, or it should not be a surprise when Nigerians across the country are complaining about the state of roads. I think there has long been this appreciation, or this idea rather, that when you see a road in the country and it's in deplorable condition, Look at the president. Look at the Minister of Works. That's the natural inclination, naturally, right? But that's not the way the federal system works. And when you recognize that only 16%, representing the 35,000 kilometers I mentioned, belong to the federal government, another 16%, another 35,000 kilometers belong to the states, and then a whopping
so I get that. I'm talking about funds.
Or 130,000 belong to the local governments. You'll recognize why this judgment is so important.
Absolutely. So talking about fund, because what we know is that, thankfully you're here to help us clarify that. The report is that the president has said he would renegotiate the sharing formula, because there are those who say some local governments can survive on the FAC allocation without help from the state. Another opinion is that if you're sincere with what they get from the federal governments, they will survive on their own. But in all of this, how do we also strike a delicate, balanced approach that takes into account the unique needs and circumstances of each local government, which is crucial for ensuring effective governance and service delivery at the grassroots level? So those local government chairmen who really want to work would have enough to work, so they wouldn't be at the mercy of their governors.
Well, look, I think that the parameters for implementation is still very much in process, and I think it's very important that I am not on a primetime television platform presupposing or preempting processes that have yet to conclude. With that said, I think that what Nigerians expect of public officials at all levels of government following the judgment of the Supreme Court is a mature, rational, and clear-sighted approach to coordination and working together in a fashion that obviously upholds the judgment of the Supreme Court, but also ensures that there is an effective monitoring and evaluation mechanism for the local governments who will now be benefiting from this direct infusion of resource that should have been made available to them for over a very long period of time now. I also think that there is not, I think, enough understanding and as a result conversation about the extent of what local government administrators must be responsible for. I think there's kind of this two-sided understanding of, or should I say, a dualized viewpoint of a kind of administration in the country, just simply between national and subnational. But there is that third tier, and I think to be able for our people to be able to effectively hold to account local government administrators, it's going to be pivotal that there's an understanding widely of what it is their local governments are expected to do in relation to the state governments, and ultimately ensuring that there's coordination between the local government areas within any state, so that you don't have, duplicated, programs and projects, overlap, and underdevelopment that results from that. So I think there's quite a bit of work that's still going to be done, frankly, in terms of the implementation of the judgment. I don't think there's any question about that. But I do think that there is a very wide and robust consensus amongst not just the Nigeria Governors Forum, but also amongst the unions like ALGAN, for example, associations rather like ALGAN, as well as the federal government, around the fact that the judgment has been rendered, and now the hard work at a full implementation of that judgment that is just and that is ultimately functioned to deliver world-class service delivery to Nigerians who, of course, live within these local government areas and LCDAs across the country, that this is all about ensuring that their best interest is met. And I think the president's move to institute the suit that led to this judgment is ultimately going to be one of those crown jewels in his legacy crown at the end that Nigerians will look back on and say, yes, it was the administration of President Bola Tinubu that saw this come into effect. And I think it's also important to mention very quickly, Jumoke, that this wasn't the first attempt, right? But it is the first one that's successful. And the reason why was, if you recall, under the administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari, there was an attempt to, of course, implement, first of all, produce and then implement an executive order that was obviously challenged in court that sought to do something similar, but the process obviously was not as perhaps well considered, and of course the result was that it was not able to stand up. But because the process was well considered, we have now seen the right outcome. And I think the final leg of this that should get, I think, a little bit more attention than it does is the fact that there was a specific stipulation within the judgment that dealt with the fact that you have, for a very long time, had unelected caretaker chairman essentially, using the resources of the people without any accountability with respect to, why it is that they're in that office in the first place. I think dealing with that, I think, is going to be one of the major elements ultimately that we'll look back on and say, if anybody's going to handle the resources of the people, certainly it should be somebody with a mandate, from the people themselves. So there are really a lot of elements as to why, despite any political differences, despite any differences along ethnic, religious, gender, or any other kind of artificial line between people in the country, there was universal praise for the judgment of the Supreme Court and for the institution of the suit by the administration of His Excellency Mr. President that led to it.
All right. So let's talk about the economy. The main drivers of Nigeria's economy met with the Finance Committee of the National Assembly yesterday and declared that the ailing economy was getting revitalized based on emerging indicators. At that meeting, the Group Executive Officer of NNPCL, Lekari, revealed that the Port Harcourt refinery would start production by early next month, that's August, which will be followed by the one in Warri months after, and Kaduna refinery latest by December this year. Is this something Nigerians should look forward to? And I'm asking because that date has been postponed 2 to 3 times in the last 1 year, and Nigerians are losing hope.
There is absolutely nothing that the president detests more than when public officials come out on television or anywhere else and they make statements about what they will deliver on, and then they fail to deliver on those timelines. It is something he abhors. It's something he does not like. And I think the scenario that is played out with respect to the NNPCL-owned refineries is a scenario which is obviously highly technical. There are a lot of factors involved. We don't want to oversimplify that, but it's extremely important to the president that if any official is coming out saying that a refinery is going to start up, that is going to produce the products it's promising to produce at scale, that it abides by those timelines. Frankly, the conversation around a mechanical startup as against actual output of refined products, it's just not something that tallies with the president. I think the president has very clearly warned the officials involved, in some of those public utterances, as well as the process of the fullest output of those products expected from the NNPCL-owned refineries, that they have to deliver on it. If they do not deliver on it within a time frame, that he as president himself will lose confidence. And if he loses confidence in his own words, and I do quote the president, heads will roll. This is what he said, and he said it openly. And so this is what it is. Public officials have to be very careful under this president, that if they make public statements about what they're going to deliver on, that they deliver on those. The credibility of the administration at large is not going to be impacted by the inability of 1 or 2 institutions to deliver on the timelines that they've promised Nigerians. And so that's more or less the position of the president with respect to the issue of the refineries. But I would also say that the president is focused on also making sure that even as we deal with the publicly owned refineries coming on stream on a timetable that can be delivered on. And we're not talking about mechanical startups now, we're talking about the actual output. But that he's actively facilitating the process of the establishment of new private refineries in the country and making sure that they have the handshake they need with the various institutions within the sector, government institutions within the sector, to effectively meet their completion targets as well. So there's really a lot to unpack there, but I think it suffices to say that the NNPCL and other institutions are on watch by the President, that they have a mandate to deliver and to deliver on schedule.
All right, then, but with a drastic decline in Nigeria's crude oil production, which is now about 1.25 million barrels per day, there are calls for a total overhaul of the NNPCL. Nigerians are asking the President to take charge of the petroleum industry, declare a state of emergency by probing the NNPCL, just as it did with the CBN. And, I mean, you would agree with me that it's a fact that the spotlight on accountability and transparency in government-critical institutions is long overdue. Should Nigerians look forward to that as well?
Certainly, I am not in the business of preempting the actions and decisions of the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I think it is far too premature to speculate about whether certain specific actions would be taken or not taken. That is the total prerogative of the President. I do think it is safe to say that whatever actions, whatever decisions taken by the President will be taken on the basis of the merits of any particular scenario as it unfolds before him, and he'll take appropriate action. Look, it is not in the interest of the President, it is not in the interest of the Nigerian people for the performance of any particular government institution or even, a quasi-public institution to be functioning at anywhere less than, the optimum. So as long as that is the case, you can assume quite safely that the administrators of those institutions will be under a lot of pressure. Look, the President is he's a meritocrat. He is someone who believes in verifiable, trackable performance, key performance indicators that are met. And if he continues to hear a recycling of old stories or excuses as to why something is not working after a number of years, a day will come when he will conclude that he would take an action in one direction or the other. That is not news to anybody who has watched the President function as a public sector leader over the course of his storied career. That applied in Lagos State. Nobody was going to be sitting down with any kind of substandard performance and expecting to stay in office throughout a term. And the same applies as President. Everybody's under pressure to perform. That is not an NNPCL-related statement. That relates to everybody, including myself. If I'm not doing my job well, I will be sacked like anybody else. That's the President we have signed up to work for. And that's the President Nigerians have elected. And that's the reason why the country is going to move forward at a pace that it has not moved forward in the past. So look, if you're asking specifically about the NNPCL, there is no such decision that has been taken. If it was taken, I think Nigerians would be very well and speedily informed about that. But I think it's safe to say that the President demands the top level of performance amongst all institutions of government and all officials of government. And it is going to be on that basis that they will continue in office or be sacked. And as you rightly mentioned, if you look at the CBN, I think we probably shouldn't conflate what occurred in the CBN with other institutions simply because you're talking about criminal activity and criminal exposure, right? So that's a little bit of a different territory. But I do think that there is something to be said about the fact that, when His Excellency Mr. President made the changes in the CBN, and then, of course, put in place a leader of credibility in the person of CBN Governor Yemi Cardoso, we've seen a total 180 turnaround to the extent that within just 1 year, we've paid off over $7 billion worth of foreign exchange denominated USD-denominated foreign exchange debt. There's been a lot that has happened. So, look, performance will be measured. The president will take the right decisions at the right time, but ultimately he's concerned about getting the results. And he also is someone who understands with sophistication that sacking someone is not necessarily the answer to every problem, right? Sometimes it is the answer. In the case of CBN, under the past leadership and now the present leadership, clearly that was the answer. It was a major part of the answer. But with respect to crude oil theft and where you have a lot of stakeholders and a lot of actors and a lot of moving parts, I'm not suggesting that it's the fault of one person or so many people, but what I am saying is that I think the president recognizes that these are sophisticated and complicated problems that don't have one single silver bullet. Yes, a bullet can be fired to make faster progress in a certain direction, but that doesn't mean that, you know, just simply sacking someone from office is going to bring is going to make oil production rise to 2 million barrels per day next month. I think it's a little bit more convoluted and a little bit more complicated than that.
All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll look at all the matters. Please stay with us, everyone.
One year ago, a new government stepped into the spotlight and took the reins of our nation. The promises were grand, the challenges immense. Daria Media, with the support of the MacArthur Foundation and in partnership with TVC News, presents The First Year, a comprehensive review of our government's progress, achievements, and the areas that need attention. We will hear directly from the government and the work it has done in the areas of the economy, security, and governance in the last 1 year, with the renewed hope agenda of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Witness the transparent assessments of the promises made. Watch and listen directly to government representatives as they engage with ordinary Nigerians. Join us live in partnership with TVC News, NTA, Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos, FRCN, and all our social media handles. Date is 17th and 18th of July at 11 a.m.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. And I've been speaking with Jurin Gilali, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, and tonight we're discussing local government autonomy, the Nigerian economy, and other matters. Thank you so much for staying with us, Jurin. Now let's move on with this conversation. In the last few days, the federal government has announced the immediate dispatch of a total of 740 lorry loads of rice to the 36 states of the Federation. And from my calculation, that's about 24,000 bags of rice per state, targeting the most vulnerable in the society. But what measures are in place to ensure this gets to the common man? So in a few weeks, you did not hear that a governor took 2 trucks and shared the remaining bags of rice to commissioners and, and all of that. What measures are in place?
Well, I think it's extremely important that we don't, even by framing, this kind of a conversation, ab initio, shade legitimate efforts to ameliorate the suffering of our people with any kind of a suspicion before some of these activities would have even, taken place. I do think that the President is very clear about the mandate of ensuring that these food items get to the various wards across the country in an equitable fashion, in a way that is not skewed by politics, that's not skewed by any other consideration other than what is in the interest of the Nigerians living within these localities. And I think that's clear in the actions he's taken. For example, if you look at the reform of even the animal husbandry industry most recently. If you recall, before His Excellency Mr. President established as he put forward the the Presidential Committee on Livestock Reforms. Most recently, he made some leadership changes, effectively replacing the national chairman of the APC, His Excellency Abdullahi Ganduje, with himself as chairman, that is, Mr. President as chairman, and then, of course, appointing Professor Atahiru Jega, formerly the INEC chairman, as the deputy chairman of that committee, who will preside over that committee when the president is unavailable. The point here is that in everything the president is doing with respect to food security, he is determined to depoliticize that sector, and he's determined to ensure that there is a clear understanding across the entire country that everything that has to do with food security, the provision of food, the provision of resources, the provision of even student loans, where we have a justice and fairness provision within the NEL Fund Enabling Act, for example, ensuring that we don't have any of these kinds of skewed the skewed application of these resources, that across the board his focus is making sure that everybody has equitable access, and that these programs are run not on the basis of who you know or what political party you belong to, but on the basis of who can actually achieve their mandate. So it's no different with the provision of food supplies, but I think we also should be mindful of the fact that when we talk about, why it is, for example, that the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, and industrial groups and associations across the country, NECA and other employers of labor in the country are coming out to praise this administration, it's not simply because of a student loan program or the establishment of the Consumer Credit Corporation and the Consumer Credit Program, or what he's doing with respect to the reform of the livestock industry. It's also about the creation of opportunity, right? The fact that we're having direct capital formation, being directed at micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises to the tune of millions of businesses across all local government areas of the Federation. The fact that the President is embarking upon the largest public works, operation probably in the history of the country at once, when you look at the wide scope of over 300 federal roadways presently under construction or reconstruction, in addition to the new construction of major superhighway arteries, including the Lagos to Calabar highway, as well as the Badagry to Sokoto highway, amongst many, many others. I mean, there's just so much going on. And when we're talking about roads, it's not just to say the president did this road or the administration of the president did this road. It's about the value that is added to the worker who is constructing that road. It's about the value added to the vendors who are supplying sand and cement and other items to those construction sites that are littered literally across all local government areas of the Federation. It will be difficult to find parts of the country where there is not one major road construction site present. This is the vision of the president, making sure that you don't just have growth for growth's sake, but that you have growth that's inclusive, you have growth that directly touches the lives of Nigerian families. For every vendor who is supplying sand to a construction site across all the local government areas of the Federation today, you have 3 or 4 children in that household that are being directly fed and their school fees paid by virtue of that road project that is within that vicinity. So these things have real life impacts on real Nigerian families to the tunes of millions across the country. And this is why you're seeing the turnaround of the Nigerian economy and the increasingly wide acceptability of the reform efforts of His Excellency Mr. President.
Right. So as a follow-up to that, because I remember that about a week ago, the federal government announced a strategic plan to boost food security. And the president called on state governors to work towards meeting the food security needs of their states. So what kind of feedback are you getting from, or has the presidency been getting concerning this?
Well, the state governors have been very clear that they are receiving ample support from the federal government with respect to, not just the provision of tractors and other forms of kind of agricultural, mechanical instrumentation like that, but also in the form of seedlings, in the form of low-interest capital, in the form of sectoral de-risking finance. I mean, there is a wide slate of interventions that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has put in place to ensure that farmers in the localities across all local government areas of the country are directly benefiting from federal interventions, but not just federal direct interventions, but also indirect interventions, supporting the state governments with counterpart facilities, counterpart funds, so that they can actually scale up existing state interventions in terms of food production. These are things that are all going on across the country. Now, naturally, when you are facing the kinds of deficits that we face, built over decades, you're going to have, complaints from some quarters that as much as the president's administration is doing, that it's not enough. For some, whatever the president does will never be enough, frankly. But the president is focused on making sure that to the greatest extent of the resources available to the Federation, that he is putting the resources, applying the resources in a way that deals with rising food prices in the country, stabilizing those and ultimately moving those toward a downward trajectory, and also making sure that while we deal with kind of the short-term aspects of the food security problem, which is obviously making sure that food prices in the markets are going down, that we're dealing with it in a way that is conducive to our long-term plans. What do I mean by that? It's one thing to say that you're going to, potentially put in place measures to spur the inflow of food supply into the country. It's another thing entirely to say, while we are doing that on the one track, we have another medium to long-term track where we are actively bringing in thousands, and I'm not exaggerating when I say thousands, of tractors and agricultural mechanical instruments that can be supplied to very strategically identified, food belts and farms across the length and breadth of the country, so that we have sustainably enhancing output from our farmers while dealing with a major aspect of why we have not attained food security in the country, which is the lack of cold chain in the country. The fact that we do not have a broad base of refrigeration facilities, resulting in a scenario in which you have up to 40 and 50% of total output from many of our farms across the country spoiling before they get to the markets from the farms. So obviously that creates an under presence of these food items in marketplaces across the country, whereas it should be doubled if we had cold chain facilities. And it is within by the wisdom of His Excellency Mr. President that through the Renewed Hope Infrastructure Development Fund, he put in place hundreds of billions of naira for the facilitation of cold chain infrastructure to be placed across major farms across the country where the bulk majority of our food is being produced, so that we can actually get 90 to 100% of the output that is produced into the markets, thus creating a surplus that will lead to the crash of food items. So there is a short-term measure, there's a medium-term and a long-term measure, and the President is implementing all of them simultaneously. And we're all going to be very, very fortunate that he chose to administer, to address this problem in this fashion.
Right. So it's interesting to hear you talk about the long-term measures, because Nigerians have been asking about what exactly government is doing within this 150-day period to give us some security after the window is over. But I'd like you to also react to other matters. The NLC has threatened to go on strike, one month strike, if the governors force the National Assembly to decentralize minimum wage. And some Nigerians are saying decentralization of minimum wage may not work in a country like Nigeria, where this decentralization can be manipulated by governors, and there needs to be a benchmark that nobody can go below. but can go above. I mean, if not, some governors will announce, 20,000 naira as minimum wage. I'd like you to react to that.
Thank you very much, Jumoke. You know, I was very privileged and really, obviously, with a job like the one I have and the access to information I have, I'm humbled and privileged every day to work where I work. I know that it's a rare privilege. I was privileged to be in the room last Thursday when the leadership of organized labor in the country, particularly the NLC president and the TUC president, met President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in the State House. And aside from, applauding the judgment that came out of the Supreme Court, that led to essentially local government financial autonomy, that one of the major aspects of the conversation had to do also with whether or not and to what extent can we be creative in the evolution and crafting of a medium to long-term strategy on this question of a minimum wage. And I think the president gave organized labor a lot to think about, and they asked for 1 week to come back. That week elapses tomorrow, so expect an engagement tomorrow as a follow-up. But what I would say is that we're fortunate that we elected a financial engineer and someone who thinks very creatively outside of the box on how to craft solutions really out of very difficult and limited resources and circumstances. And that is the case here. The president is thinking through many options. I think some of the options on the table include the opportunity potentially to have a minimum wage that is not necessarily fixed into perpetuity. We don't necessarily have to agree today that whatever minimum wage we agree on today will last for the next 30 or 40 years. We don't have to play that game anymore. What we can actually do is be a little bit more creative and think through, based on the verifiable economic conditions of the country and based on the verifiable resource constraints of the country as it is today, that we can fashion out an agreement with organized labor on a minimum wage that would be scaled against the economic realities of the country as they continue to improve. We know that the economy is on an upswing. We know that inflation is going to be tracking down as revenues track up. We are seeing those trends right now. But what we are saying is, because we know that things are going to track upwards and that we're climbing out of a pit at the moment, that because of that confidence we have in that, we can actually say, based on the economic realities and financial constraints of the country today, we can peg a minimum wage at a certain place and agree together with you, organized labor, for example, that over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, as conditions improve, we can now phase it up in accordance with the economic growth of the country and the revenue growth of the country, so that it's a win-win for everybody. Everybody knows that we're not in an all-out war depending on what happens today, that if you don't win today, then you die. No, nobody's dying. Everybody's alive and we'll face tomorrow. So let's approach today's negotiation with the view that we will be at the table tomorrow once again.
All right, so 2 more issues, and I'd like us to manage our time very well. So finally, Nigerians can now visit Dubai, but it looks like there are some restrictions. According to reports circulating, there's a conversation about 700,000 naira for document verification, 10,000 naira, I do apologize, $10,000 in your bank account. And for a mutually beneficial country, Nigerians think the federal government should have negotiated better. So can you confirm the authenticity of this report?
I think it is not in the position of a presidential spokesperson, or frankly any government spokesperson, to be getting into anything that is considered confidential within the agreements that are signed between 2 countries or more countries. I think that would be irresponsible on my part, and I wouldn't take part in that. What I would say is this. There was a lot of doubt about whether or not the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was going to succeed in getting this visa ban that had been standing for years removed. There was skepticism and trepidation around the idea of whether or not the Emirates Airlines would ever fly into the country again. For example, direct flights to the UAE. And, of course, as always, the president doesn't talk a lot, but he delivers a lot. And that's the case here. The Nigerians have seen that Emirates has announced that they are returning to the country later this year. Nigerians have seen that the visa ban has indeed been lifted and that the agreement between the two heads of state has held up to reality. It is true. It has happened. It's being implemented. And so, look, this is another fruit of the very successful engagement the president has had with his counterparts around the world, and another bit of evidence as to the rising credibility and reputational integrity of our country in the Global Committee of Nations, that people are ready to honor their agreements with us because they recognize that we are being led by a serious leader, a reforming leader, a leader who will take bold decisions that will reposition the Nigerian economy and the Nigerian nation for future growth. And that is growth that that countries around the world are now trying to tap into, which is why you're seeing the moves that other countries are making to fix whatever would have gone wrong, in relation to their relationship with past administrations in the country. So Nigerians should be excited about the new development, and they should expect more because the president is going to deliver more. And the more he goes out, the more loved Nigeria becomes. And this is why we elected him to be our chief ambassador, and this is why Nigerians should be optimistic that tomorrow's Nigeria is going to be much better than today's.
All right, then. Sadly, we're out of time, but, I mean, probably next time we speak, we'll talk about all you've been doing in your capacity as Special Presidential Envoy on Climate Action. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. During Giladi, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity. Thank you very much for joining us.
Always a tremendous privilege to be with you. God bless you.
And thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG. You can use the hashtag Politics Tonight. And we're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night, everyone.
Mortein insecticide with its improved formulation kills 100% mosquitoes that spread malaria. So, spread the message of how we can fight to end malaria with Mortein. Mortein, our #1 choice.
We're live in the open market for Epic 10X Challenge. My people, today now. Today, I will show you how the power of new Epic 10X gives your toilet a better cleaning than bleach.
Than bleach?
Yes, so.
Impossible.
Toilets have stains which bleach cannot clean effectively. But Epic is thicker and sticks better, which gives 10X better cleaning versus bleach and kills germs.
Oh, wow.
You can now see that Epic is better than